Hello, dear ones, and welcome to Seasonal Sight. This is a contemplative reflection on the current astrological season, viewed through the perspective of Temperance. And before we begin, I want to be clear that this is not a prediction and not something to take as absolute truth. Seasonal Sight is simply an offering, an invitation to practice discernment, to notice patterns, subtle shifts that may be unfolding around you and within you, and to reflect on how you are choosing to respond. Nothing shared here is meant to replace your own wisdom, accountability, or lived experience. So take what feels meaningful, leave what does not. In this space definitely calls for deep honesty because Temperance does not live in extremes. It speaks to balance, to steadiness, to clarity, and the ability to regulate oneself with intention. So, as you move through this reading, I invite you to remain grounded, aware, and open, allowing insight to emerge naturally without trying to force it into shape. So let's begin. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It begins the astrological year. It marks emergence, ignition, and the raw life force. The usual Aries signature is boldness, it's instinct, courage, right? Action, desire, and the will to move first. But this particular Aries season carries much more depth, weight, and spiritual complexity. Because Neptune, Saturn, and Chiron are so involved in this season, this beginning is not shallow. It is asking us to begin again with more awareness, acting from alignment, and choosing a truer identity. Aries rules the self. It's the I am point in the zodiac. And with the sun conjunct Neptune and then Saturn early in the season, identity is going to be dissolved and tested. And this makes this Aries season especially potent for the ones who are trying to redefine who they are, what they stand for, what they want, and how they use their energy. The repeated Chiron emphasis is important. Venus conjunct Chiron and then the Sun conjunct Chiron, followed by a new moon in Aries late in the sign. They bring this deepest new beginning through vulnerability. Aries usually wants strength, but Chiron asks for honesty. So this season will bring up wounds around our self-worth, rejection, anger. Temperance fits beautifully with the astrology. Aries season would normally push hard, but the astrology says pace yourself. And why? Because Neptune's involvement can blur motives, can drain our energy, or can create idealism without being grounded. And Saturn demands discipline. And Temperance gives us the answer. It's right calibration. The full moon in Libra on April the 2nd brings the axis on the self and other into focus. And this full moon will highlight relationship imbalances where independence and partnership need recalibration. Who are we? And what kind of relationships can hold this version of self? The ruler of Aries is Mars. Mars governs action, will, desire, courage, but also conflict, instinct, physical energy, and the way we go after what we want. So every Aries season is filtered through the condition of Mars. And here, Mars becomes especially important because it enters Aries on April 9th. moving into its own sign, which strengthens its expression, and that usually increases confidence, directness, urgency. But then Mars also immediately conjoins Neptune on the 13th of April, and that changes everything. Instead of this pure force of Mars, it will be infused with Neptune's symbolism. The ruling planet this season is not expressing in a pure martial way. It is more mystical, more porous, more visionary, let's say. And this makes Aries season 2026 less about conquest and more about courage. Aries season 2026 is a point between confusion and embodiment, a call to begin again with courage, discipline, and with a more honest relationship to our own. This part of Aries season is about getting our body, our energy, and our material life back into the right relationship through regulation. This is a season where our physical world will feel like it is asking for two things at once. For us to purge what drains us, and for us to stabilize what truly supports us. So it brings necessary elimination, cutting out what is excessive, stagnant, or destructive. Growth cannot continue while our system is carrying what no longer belongs there. That makes this a strong season for looking honestly at our habits, our work pace, our spending, to look at clutter, overcommitment, and even the ways our body has been absorbing stress. So this season, don't be subtle about it. Just cut the habit, cut the expense, cut the obligation, the object, or the pattern that is eating energy without giving life back. At the same time, we are reminded that stability does not come from controlling everything. It comes from trusting the road ahead enough to stay present in our body and meeting life one step at a time. There is also a strong warning about impulsivity, hastiness, and distraction. In the physical domain, this can show up as burnout, as inconsistent routines, chasing easy fixes, or never fully finishing what would actually create stability. So, physically, this is not a season for constantly starting over. It is a season for completion, for consolidation, and reducing chaos. Scattered energy is part of the problem. So this season, choose one physical or material task and complete it. There is dormant life force that wants to wake up. The body is asking for rest, but is also asking for conscious activation. Our vitality rises when our practices are consistent enough to let energy build up instead of just leak. Okay, so prayer, meditation, breath, movement, just being in your body on purpose with intention. It's very important. So the physical domain here includes our relationship to our finances, to our resources, right? And what enough feels like. So look at sleep, look at food, look at pace, look at your workspace, at your budget and your boundaries. The energy of this domain is purification, grounding, and recalibration. The body wants less chaos, less waste, less overextension. It wants more steady rhythms, cleaner commitments, and a more honest relationship with energy output. This is a season of noticing where we are depleted because we are split into many directions, or we are reacting too fast, or carrying what should have been released already. Our stability depends on what we stop feeding, Not everything deserves our energy or attention. If something repeatedly creates restlessness, drains our body, scatters our focus, and keeps us in survival mode, we must regulate it through removing it from our lives and simplifying. Consistency is what creates true safety. An Aries season may tempt us to move fast, but our body trusts repetition more than spikes of motivation. This is a season where feelings, longing, attraction, and discomfort are all trying to teach us something about emotional self-sourcing. We must nourish ourselves and know how to stay steady even in extreme conditions. Aries season will ask us to stop acting like every unmet need is an emergency. It will teach us self-reliance, emotional responsibility, and the ability to regulate anger, judgment, or reactivity by returning to our own inner resources. This is Temperance, bringing the opposites into balance. This season brings emotional growth point where we have to choose between what is familiar and what is actually good for our growth. Old attachments no longer make sense, but moving beyond them, of course, feels exposed and difficult. We are outgrowing emotional dependency, avoiding blame, and developing a more stronger backbone in how we relate. So we must return to what nourishes us daily and we must find joy in life. When we are out of balance, we become pushy, we become insistent and sharp. So the emotional lesson here is to choose nourishing pleasure over frantic, nourishing pleasure over frantic. So the emotional lesson here is to choose nourishing pleasure over frantic craving. And there is a strong pull towards what feels good, what feels familiar, and what promises relief. But underneath that, there is a deeper lesson about emotional maturity, learning the difference between true nourishment and compulsive reaching. We must regulate first, grow through discomfort, and let joy feed us, but never letting desire turn into agitation. Our emotions need honest care, not constant indulgence or suppression. And this season can reveal where we cling to what is emotionally familiar. We avoid discomfort by chasing quick pleasure. We feel guilt around desire and expect others to soothe what we have not learned to hold ourselves. So we are already carrying more inner resources than we think. And growth requires leaving the old emotional comfort zone. Because pleasure is sacred when it truly nourishes us. But things become distorted when our desire is desperate. So the deeper emotional truth of Aries season is that we need to feel fully, up to completion, but without abandoning ourselves inside a feeling. Okay, I want to have some clarifiers from the cards. What is here for us? Well, okay. Quite a lot. We have King of Wands reversed, Seven of Swords reversed also, Death card, and the Empress reversed. Okay, let's look one at a time. Okay, this is clearly not about casual emotion or superficial desire. We have here the King of Wands reverse that tells us that emotional energy is potent, but not necessarily clean. There is passion, there is longing, there is anger, but it may be coming through in ways that are reactive, ego-driven, impatient. And this can look like wanting intensity instead of intimacy, wanting to control things instead of just being honest, or trying to force movement in places where what is actually needed is emotional truth. So I don't see that desire itself as the problem. The problem is the way desire may be carried when there is inner instability underneath it. And there is a tendency this season to feel emotionally charged, right? To feel triggered, to act from frustration, from pride, or to use attraction, pursuit, or emotional performance as a way to avoid sitting with what is uncomfortable but true. So this can point to a desire that has become entangled with restlessness, with anger, with validation, or the need to prove something. And then we have the Seven of Swords reverse that comes in and strips away the ability to keep hiding from that truth. This card reversed brings exposure. It's not the first time she pops up here. It brings the return of what has been avoided. It brings self-deception into the light. Emotionally, this suggests that during Aries season, it becomes much harder to keep pretending we do not know what we feel, what we want, what pattern are we repeating, or where we have been betraying ourselves. This can be deeply uncomfortable, right? Because this doesn't always expose lies from the outside first. Reversed, it often reveals that the subtle lies that we tell ourselves, that story that we do not care when we do, right? Or that we are over something when we are not. That, we are in control when we are actually acting out of fear or insecurity. And this axis, in this axis, the Seven of Swords reverse says the avoidance pattern is no longer sustainable. Emotional honesty is no longer something optional. It's something in us that is being pushed to admit the truth. And once the truth starts surfacing, death enters and makes it clear that this is just not about awareness. This is about ending something, right? Death in the emotional axis is powerful because it says that an old attachment, an old emotional identity, or an old way to relate to desire is reaching its end. And this is not a minor adjustment. This is the recognition that the old cycle cannot continue if we want real change. So for some of you, this may be the death of chasing unavailable people or unavailable outcomes. And for others, it may be the death of using fantasy to avoid reality. The death of confusing longing with love. or the death of patterns where intensity has been mistaken for nourishment. Death asks for release at a deeper level. It asks us to stop reviving what has already died, right? It asks us to let an emotional cycle end, even if part of us still feels attached to that. That is what makes this card so profound here. It's not only removing what hurts, it's removing what has defined us emotionally for longer than we may realize. And then beneath all this, we have the Empress reverse, which reveals the deeper wound. This card shows that this issue is not just distorted desire or emotional avoidance. This issue is rooted in deprivation, in disconnection from our own worth, in difficulty receiving, in the fear that our needs are too much, or in the habit of giving more externally while remaining internally undernourished. Right? The Empress reversed in the emotional axis often points to a relationship with pleasure and care that has become stagnant. There may be guilt around receiving. There may be a tendency to overgive and then feel empty. There may be a learned habit of neglecting our own emotional body while still trying to function as if we are full. And that matters because when nourishment is missing, desire becomes distorted, right? We reach for what stimulates us instead of what sustains us, and we cling to the crumbs, right? Because we no longer remember what fullness feels like. So we may chase because we do not trust that we can attract and receive. Or we may suppress because we do not feel worthy of wanting something. And the Empress reversed here is exposing our desire patterns, but also the place in us that has been starved. So with all of this, we can see that Aries season is a season of emotional truth. It is a season where distorted passion, hidden motives, self-abandonment, and these old attachment loops can no longer stay in the dark. Something is being revealed so that something can end. And what is being asked to end is the old way we relate to desire, the way we have used to chase worth, to avoid grief, to maintain control, right? To stay in this fantasy. This season wants to strip all of that down. It wants to show where we have been emotionally brave and where we have been emotionally evasive. Most of all, I feel it wants to show us that our healing is tied to learning how to stop abandoning ourselves inside our own longing. Because the transformation is just not about saying no to unhealthy attachment. It's also about saying yes to self-nourishment. It is about rebuilding a relationship to our emotional body that is rooted in worth, receptivity, and truth. It's about realizing that not every intense feeling is a call to act, that not every desire is meant to be followed, because sometimes Desires are just messengers, right? Some cravings are actually symptoms. Some attachments we have are just mirrors showing us where we have not yet learned to hold ourselves. And this Aries season is asking us to become mature enough to know the difference. So the emotional lesson of this season is not suppression and it's not indulgence, it's honesty. It's the courage to admit what we actually feel, what we want, and the discipline to stop feeding what is harming us. It is allowing an old version of ourselves, especially the version built around emotional survival patterns, to fall away. It is recognizing where desire has become tangled with a wound and then choosing to untangle it. And it's returning to the part of ourselves that deserves care, pleasure, tenderness, beauty, and emotional safety. Not as something that we need to earn, but as something that should have never ever been withheld from us in the first place. And in that sense, this domain is deeply, deeply aligned with temperance. Because temperance here is not just about balance in a simple sense. It's about emotional alchemy. It's about taking the heat of desire, the exposure of truth, the grief of endings, and turning all of that into wisdom. It is about finding the middle through transformation. And that middle is not cold or detached. It's something alive. It's honest. It's self-respecting. It is the place where we can finally feel deeply enough without disappearing into what we feel. And there is another layer to this emotional access, because it shows that healing is not only happening through exposure and endings, but also through a return to sensuality, to receptivity. We don't need to rush to prove ourselves. We need silence. We need to listen to our instinct. We need deep self-trust. So emotionally, this says that this season wants us to stop fearing the stillness long enough so we can hear what our deep emotional truth actually is. There is something about this season that wants us to teach us there is something about this season that wants to teach us that not all desire is meant to be loud. You know, some emotions just need space. Some need tenderness. Some truths only come up when we stop overstimulating ourselves and allow the softer layers of our emotional body to speak. There is power in that. There is healing in that. There is sensual intelligence in that. And if we have been living in emotional overdrive, chasing intensity, right? This is a reminder that our deepest emotional wisdom only will arrive in silence, in softness, and in darkness. And if you want to know more about our relationship to darkness and our sensuality and sexuality, watch chapter 2 about creation on the initiation level of the Temperance path. I will leave the link down below. This axis is showing a season where pressure is not random. It is exposing the exact places where our self-trust wavers. Aries season is pushing us into a confrontation with our own inner authority. it shows us the anxious side of pressure. In the solar plexus axis, this points to fear around competence, around outcomes, and a tendency to undermine ourselves by feeding narratives of danger before we have even tested our actual strength. It suggests that one of the core challenges of this season is learning how much our thoughts and words shape our confidence. This is the moment when a great decision must be made. In this personal axis, the season is asking us to stop scattering our will across things that do not truly belong to our path. It says our confidence is tied to alignment. When we hesitate too long, over intellectualize, or refuse to commit, our power leaks. And the deeper issue may not be that we do not know what to do. It may be that we know, but we are afraid of the responsibility that comes with choosing. The solar plexus gets compromised when boundaries are weak. And there is a lack of healthy direction and healthy limits here. In this domain, that can show up as giving our energy to too many people, letting other people's needs or opinions interfere with our confidence, or measuring our worth through external responsiveness rather than inner steadiness. It can also point to issues around stress, where we become overly involved in things that drain us, and then we wonder why our courage disappears. Self-esteem suffers when our energy is constantly leaking into spaces that are not ours to carry. And the medicine here is learning to become patient and firm enough to protect our own direction. Aries season is actually trying to awaken us. It is calling us to rise above fear-based self-concepts and step into a more radiant form of authority. We are stronger than we think. Challenge is not here to diminish us, but it's here to help us, to teach us, to reveal us. And it also warns that when we are out of balance, this energy can become controlling. But power must be grounded, not forced. And real authority is not domination, it is embodied truth. There is a pressure here, yes, but the pressure is meaningful. This is not a passive season. It is a season of testing, of refining and strengthening our inner authority. Our confidence cannot be built on fear management alone. It has to be built on alignment, on boundaries, and the willingness to step forward even when the future is not guaranteed. So this season, stop feeding the fear story. Choose your path. Stop leaking your energy and rise anyway. The real shift happens when we stop letting fear, distraction, and entanglement decide who we are. So Aries season is putting pressure on the solar plexus so that we can see exactly where our self-trust breaks down and exactly where our true authority wants to emerge. The relational axis this season will expose where the heart has been protecting itself so thoroughly that real exchange has become difficult. There may be hesitancy around sharing what matters or allowing yourself to be seen in places that feel most real. So Aries season is asking us to look at individual relationships, but also at the deeper pattern underneath them. Our sense of belonging, our capacity to experience connection without losing ourselves, and our willingness to let love be something larger than control, defense, or role playing. There is an energy of completion here, as if the heart is being asked to mature beyond old separation stories. It reminds us that fragmentation is not the truth of our nature. The energy of this axis is the energy of a heart that is being asked to open with discernment. Something in us has stayed hidden, perhaps out of shyness, out of doubt, grief, or fear of being misunderstood. And the deeper movement of the season is toward harmony, coherence, and the realization that real connection is built through truth. The relational work here is subtle. It is about sharing what is real without forcing it, allowing grief and tenderness to exist without shutting down generosity, and understanding that our integrity in relationships depends on whether our inner truth and our outer behavior are actually aligned. This season is asking the heart to become more coherent, more honest, and more willing to trust the deeper bond between self, others, but also with life itself. I want to clarify this. Okay. One more. Temperance, the Empress again, but now upright. Show me more. Okay. Okay. So we have the Nine of Pentacles here, and it's showed up reversed. So immediately points to an imbalance in self-sufficiency, in worth, right? And in the heart domain, this suggests that part of the relational tension this season is coming from not feeling fully secure in ourselves. And because of that, relationships may start carrying too much weight. There can be an over-reliance on external affirmation, a feeling of instability underneath a composed surface, or like this subtle disconnect from our sense of being enough. This card also points to overgiving, overinvesting, or tying our sense of peace too tightly to what is happening around us. And this matters a lot because it is saying that the connection may become distorted when we are looking to relationships to restore something we have not fully anchored within ourselves. So already, this tells us that the relational work of this season is not just about other people, it's about our internal foundation. And then we have the Empress, and this time it came upright. So the Empress, as we know, is nourishment, is care, receptivity. It's embodied worth, right? And in this axis, she says that the heart wants to return to a natural state of generosity and fullness. But that return cannot happen through self-abandonment. It has to happen through genuine self-nourishment. Okay, the Empress here is powerful because she reframes relational integrity around what is life-giving. She asks whether our relationships are truly feeding our spirit, whether we are allowing ourselves to receive as much as we give, whether our compassion also includes us. And she also brings the theme of emotional and relational ripeness, right? Something in the heart wants to grow, wants to open and become more fertile. But the Empress does not thrive in a system of depletion. She thrives where care is consistent, right? Where values are lived, where truth can live, can exist without shame. And then we have the Strength reversed. And this is where the vulnerability really shows itself. Strength reversed. My daughter just wrote on top of this card. Strength reversed points to self-doubt, points to emotional fatigue, difficulty holding ourselves with calm compassion, you know? And in the heart space, this can show up as feeling more fragile than you want to admit, struggling to stay open, or trying to hold relational tension through force. And it can point to a loss of confidence in love, even a tendency to suppress what we feel or to become overwhelmed by it, right? And what makes this card important here is that it tells us the truth about capacity. It says the heart is tired of trying too hard, of carrying more than has processed, right? And because of that, relational balance becomes harder to maintain, right? You may want to be gracious, to be present, to be loving, but your inner reserves are low, you know? So Strength reverse says it's necessary to admit tenderness and approaching it with care instead of judgment. And finally, we have the Four of Swords reversed. And this card makes it clear that the heart is not fully rested, not fully settled, and possibly unable to recover because it has stayed in a state of ongoing mental or emotional activation. This can mean unresolved tension, grief, overthinking. It can feel like the heart wants peace but cannot quite get there, either because the environment is too demanding or because the internal state is too stirred up. You know, this card often carries the feeling of emerging too soon, pushing before restoration is complete, or realizing that what you thought you had moved past is still active in the body. So in relationships, that can create a pattern where you are trying to connect, forgive, or stay open from a place that is already taxed. You know, and when that happens, even sincere love can start feeling heavy. So all of this Aries season becomes much more intimate and much more real. This season is showing a heart that wants love, wants coherence, wants generosity, deeper alignment, but it's also confronting depletion, you know, shaky self-worth, fatigue, and lack of recovery. And there is a strong desire here to return to love in its healthiest form. But before that can happen, the season may ask us to tell the truth about where our heart has been running empty. It may reveal where we have been trying to sustain connection without enough support, where we have been giving from depletion. So now we see that the heart is protecting itself because it has been undernourished or overstretched. So there is here an invitation to return to wholeness after fragmentation by recognizing that the heart cannot open coherently when it's tired, when it's insecure. Relational integrity this season depends on restoration. The heart is trying to recalibrate, is trying to remember what true reciprocity feels like. It is trying to move away from patterns where love gets tangled with overgiving, right? There is real invitation here to stop treating depletion as something normal. To stop assuming that being loving means giving past your limits. The heart cannot live in integrity if it's running on emptiness. We must nurture ourselves enough that our relationships are no longer built on deficit. The Empress is the center of this reading for a reason. She says love becomes wiser when it includes the self, right? So be honest about where you feel weak and stop pretending that rest is something optional. Rebuild your own ground so that connection is not carrying your whole sense of worth. I want to see here what is externally influencing this heart space. No. Okay. I'll take it. Okay, when we look at external influences affecting this domain, the relational domain, we have here the Ten of Wands immediately present, and this is reverse. It's something that has become too heavy to carry, especially in relationships where you have been doing too much emotionally or taking too much responsibility. And then we have the Page of Cups reverse, showing that some of the energy around you may be emotionally immature, inconsistent, unable to meet the depth of what is actually needed. And then we have Temperance reverse, reveals a lack of harmony in the environment itself. It's saying to me that some connections are not balanced no matter how much you try, you know. Five of Cups brings the weight of grief, the weight of regret or disappointment. Sorrow is still present. It's still shaping the emotional atmosphere here. And to conclude, we have the Devil that makes it clear that some of these influences are not easy to release because they are tied to attachment. They are tied to fear, to guilt, to emotional bonds that still have a hold on the heart. So the healing comes when we stop trying to save what is breaking our balance and start protecting the integrity of our own heart. So some forms of closeness are not intimacy at all. They are just entrapment dressed as connection, right? And once you see that, the real act of love becomes separation from what keeps your heart in balance. This axis is about the sacredness of what we create with our words, the integrity of what we weave through communication, and the need to become quiet enough to hear the deeper truth before we speak it. So our voice is not random. Our words are threads. Our communication is building something, and our silences are building something too. An expression now has consequence, and the deeper question here is whether we are weaving our speech from alignment, from purpose and care, or from exhaustion, or being overly focused on outcomes. When we are balanced, we are appreciative, we are enthusiastic, we prosper. And when we are out of balance, we become discouraged and tired. And the throat chakra often gets distorted when expression starts feeling like labor without meaning, or when truth is reduced to performance. Communication is a living structure. What we say, how we say it, and what we repeatedly reinforce all become part of the web we live inside. There is a precious message within us, but it cannot be discerned while we are overstimulated, reactive, or speaking from pressure. It needs warmth, it needs quiet, it needs some time, and it asks for contemplation, for meditation, for introspection, and enough spaciousness for the real answer to emerge. This is not just about speaking up, it's about speaking from the right center. It is about learning that clarity comes through stillness, and that truth spoken too quickly can miss its own depth. Expression this season is meant to be coherent with what our deeper self actually knows, not just what our mind is trying to manage in the moment. So the energy of this domain is the energy of deliberate truth. It is the energy of careful weaving and deep, deep listening. Aries season will ask us to become more conscious of what we are shaping through communication. Our voice is a creative force. Do not speak from impulse. Let speech become a vessel for alignment. Let silence become a place of discernment. Let communication become something that protects truth instead of scattering it. And there will be a shift this season from reactive expression and towards meaningful expression. You may feel less called to explain yourself endlessly, less willing to say things just to soothe, to smooth the energy, and less interest in speaking from pressure. Instead, there is an invitation here to let your communication become cleaner, slower, and more internally sourced. This domain is strongly about discernment, about knowing when to speak, when to wait, when to set a boundary, when to withhold until clarity is real, and when to trust that the truth will be stronger if it emerges from depth instead of earth. Okay, we are in the mental domain, the mental axis. Aries season will bring a period where our thoughts become more pointed, our intuition will become harder to dismiss, and the cost of denial will become so much more obvious. Something significant needs to be exposed. This has already been said. It's repeating here, so it's really important, okay? And it has likely been lurking below conscious awareness for a while, creating pressure in the background. And what makes this especially important for the mental domain is that it speaks to what happens when we hesitate to be fully honest with ourselves, when we keep pretending nothing is wrong, when we avoid identifying what we really want, or when we sense the truth but we keep trying to minimize it into something easier to manage. This is exactly where discernment gets compromised. The mind starts working to protect comfort instead of perception. It rationalizes, it deflects, it delays, and keeps circling the obvious. The tension we are feeling is not confusion at all. It's the pressure of unspoken truth. So the energy of this axis is revelation. It is the feeling of something moving closer to conscious awareness, something that can no longer stay hidden without affecting our peace. There may be a heightened sense of psychological tension this season if we are trying to avoid what we already know. At the same time, if we balance ourselves, we become intriguing, captivating, and mysterious, which suggests to me that perception itself becomes powerful when it is used cleanly. When we stop distorting what we see, our intuition gets stronger. Our mind becomes more useful, right? Our perspective sharpens. But when we are out of balance, we become sneaky and destructive, which is a strong warning for this domain. Oh, it tells us that if mental clarity is resisted, the mind can become manipulative, suspicious, or self-undermining. And in temperance terms, this is the lesson of balancing analysis with trust in perception. The danger here is not only overthinking, it is also pretending not to see. Aries season will push our third eye towards a more direct relationship with reality. Aries season will push our third eye towards a more direct relationship with reality, not paranoid thinking, not projection, just honesty. Our discernment deepens when we stop decorating truth and we start acknowledging what is actually there. It asks whether our mental patterns are helping us face reality more cleanly or whether they are being used to delay the moment of recognition. And we arrive at the spiritual domain, and this domain shows that Aries season is about awakening spiritually and also about what happens when intensity or irritation starts to interfere with our ability to integrate life. Right? Spiritual maturity is not about escaping life. It's about becoming spacious enough to digest what life brings so that experience can turn into wisdom. And this season is asking us to remember that true spiritual coherence does not come from appearances. It comes from deep acceptance, from inner refinement, from the ability to let life move through us without hardening around it. But imbalance can interfere with that process. Aggression and rigid thinking is a kind of spiritual fatigue that builds when we are blaming, gossiping, or getting pulled towards people and situations that feed our imbalance instead of helping restore it. What makes this so important in the spiritual axis is that this is not always obvious at first. Sometimes the soul is tired because the system is inflamed. Sometimes perspective gets lost not because we are disconnected from spirit, but because irritation, drama, or mental rigidity have taken up too much space. This season will reveal what looks like spiritual hardness or frustration is actually overstimulation and unprocessed sensitivity. The advice here is simple and telling, and we need solo time, Our spirit needs less noise, less friction, and less collective heat in order to hear itself again. So the energy here is the tension between assimilation and agitation. On one side, we have the possibility of integrating everything, pain, change, emotions, experience, into a deeper state of compassion and inner beauty. But on the other side, we will be shown what happens when that process gets blocked by rigidity or environments that keep feeding our imbalance. And this means Aries season wants us to notice whether our spiritual life is actually helping us metabolize reality or whether we are getting pulled into reactive states that make it harder to remain connected to meaning and divinity. And in temperance terms, this is a very clear message. Remain open without bypassing the human experience. The highest form of spiritual awareness is acceptance that has been truly lived. And that acceptance becomes difficult when the system is overheated. Are you letting life become wisdom, or letting life become fuel for more inner agitation? Oh, wow. Let me clarify this. I want to clarify this energy here. Chariot reversed. Okay. The central spiritual struggle of this Aries season is spiritual frustration and the feeling of not being able to move forward because the inner forces are not aligned. Chariot reverse says that part of this spiritual fatigue or tension comes from trying to push forward when our spirit, our mind, our emotions, our body, they are not yet moving in the same direction, right? This is misalignment. It is the experience of wanting progress, wanting purpose, coherence, but feeling pulled by conflict, by reactions, by fears, by obligations. And spiritually, that can feel like disconnection from flow, like trying to force meaning instead of allowing meaning to emerge through deeper integration. While the higher path of assimilation, grace, and inner beauty is through acceptance, right? And agitation, irritation, reactivity, all these things interrupt that process of integration and acceptance. What happens when those interruptions start affecting our direction? Well, the result is a season where you may feel spiritually stalled, diverted, scattered, and even unable to trust yourself. It can feel like you are moving, but not in the right direction. There is no alignment, right? There is will present, but wisdom is not fully guiding that will. And the spiritual lesson here is to regain inner alignment before demanding outer movement, right? This card often appears when control is overriding surrender, or even when the ego is trying to take the wheel in a moment that actually requires more humility and reconnection to deeper truths. So this matters a lot. The issue is not that life is blocking us. The issue is that our own internal energies are fighting each other. One part wants peace, the other wants control. One part wants rest, the other wants to still prove itself, right? One part really wants to surrender and let go, but the other part of us is just afraid of doing that. This season will bring a spiritual identity crisis around direction, but that crisis is actually a call to integration. Not all stuckness is punishment. Sometimes it's protection. The deeper spiritual tension of Aries season will come from misalignment within the self. And this suggests that the issue is not simply a lack of faith or discipline. It may be that different parts of ourselves are pulling in different directions. And more force won't create alignment. What we need is reconnection. What we need is honesty about where this internal split is happening. What we need is humility to stop treating spiritual frustration like failure and start seeing it as information. So this season may be slowing us down, not to deny our path, but to help us reclaim it in a more integrated way. Because true spiritual movement does not happen when the self is at war with itself. It happens when will, awareness, acceptance, and direction come back into right relationship. Remaining open without bypassing the human experience means you cannot spiritually override your own fragmentation. You cannot demand transcendence from a system that is still divided or exhausted. It's important to slow down enough to notice what is not aligned in us. That is the path. And I sense a warning here, so I just want to take a few more cards to see what is this feeling of warning that I'm getting that we need to know. This one. Wait. Okay. Okay. King of Wands and upright and Eight of Pentacles reversed. So the warning here is to be careful of trying to lead life through force, confidence, or vision alone, while neglecting the deeper work of alignment. There may be a strong desire this season to move forward, to reclaim our purpose, to feel powerful again, or to take command of our direction. But this warning is saying that if the small daily work is being avoided, if the inner discipline is inconsistent, if the healing process is being rushed, then that fire can become misdirected. This is the difference between true spiritual authority and performative certainty. You know, true authority is built through practice, through patience, through refinement. And it is built through the willingness to keep returning to the work, even when it's repetitive, unglamorous. So the warning here is not against our power. It is against trying to use power to skip the process. Because this season does not want borrowed confidence. It wants embodied alignment. Otherwise, the season can produce a lot of heat without real integration. So the spiritual warning is simple, but is serious. Do not force what has not yet been fully built within you. As we bring all the 7 domains together, we see that Aries season is not a simple season of acceleration. It's not a season that can be reduced to bold beginnings, quick action, fearless movement. It's much more layered than that. This season carries the energy of initiation, yes, but initiation through balance, through exposure, through regulation, truth, and through the dedication to do the work of becoming more internally aligned. This creates a season that feels like alchemy, a season where fire is present everywhere, But the lesson is not to let that fire take over. Again and again, the message has been about regulation, refinement, and the right relationship. Not too much, not too little, not suppression, not excess. This is what makes Temperance such a perfect guide for Aries season, because Aries brings the urgency, the impulse to move, the instinct to act. But Temperance teaches that not every fire should be fed the same way. Some fires need some direction, some need containment, some need honesty. The overall tone of this season is one of conscious initiation. It is a season of becoming more honest about what drains you, what drives you, what distorts you, and what nourishes you, and what is ready to be released. This season asks for a different kind of strength. One that is less performative and more embodied, less about appearing powerful and more about becoming coherent. And that means balance across domains becomes the real spiritual practice of the season. And this reading makes it so clear that none of these layers are separate. They are speaking to each other all the time. The season is asking for awareness of the conversation between them, for gentleness with the places that are tired, for responsibility with the places that are triggered, for patience with the places that are still changing, and for trust that alignment happens gradually, not all at once. So this is an invitation to listen more deeply to what your system is already telling you. Everything is happening through integration. So let the season be less about proving yourself and more about meeting yourself. Because the real transformation of this season is not just that you move forward, is that you become more whole in the way you do. And that may be the most important message of all. You do not need to push this season into meaning. The meaning is already emerging through every layer that is asking to be listened to, tended to, and brought back into right proportion. Your task is not to overpower the process. Your task is to stay present enough to let the process change you. And as we come to the end of this seasonal site, I want to invite you to pause before rushing into whatever comes next. Some things need space, some things need reflection, some things need to be felt, observed, and integrated in their own time. If this reading brought you clarity, let clarity settle into you. If it brought up discomfort, try not to meet that discomfort with instant reaction. Stay with it. Stay curious. Very often, the deeper wisdom of a season does not arrive all at once. It reveals itself gradually through what continues to echo after the reading is over. So, Temperance reminds us that alignment is not something we force, it's something we participate in. Is the ongoing practice of recognizing what truly matters, honoring what is real, and letting go of what no longer feels aligned with the truth of who we are. So let this season be one of integration, one of adjustment, honesty, and deeper self-trust. The action will come when it's time. For now, the invitation is to allow the alignment. May you move through this season with discernment and responsibility. May you give yourself permission to release what has become heavy and to trust what is slowly coming back into balance. Thank you for being here with me and for sharing this space, and I'll see you in the next seasonal site. Much love.